Let me give you some background information on the situation. My name is John. I'm 16 at the time of the event, in the middle of my junior year. I'm of Asian descent and am nearsighted, which means I can't see far away, which is like a couple inches away from my face. It all started when I was in my homeroom. I'll call my teacher Miss H. Now, Miss H was a young woman in her 30s, but looked much older than she was. She taught history, and I have her second period. First period just ended, and I'm just getting into class. As I walk over to my seat, I see a skinny black-haired kid sitting there. "Are you the new kid?" I asked. "Yeah, my name's Kyle." "Cool, my name's John. I don't want to seem rude, but you are in my seat, so could you please move?" He gave me this face that a child makes when you don't give them what they want. He sat up and sat in the seat behind me. He reeked of somebody who hasn't showered in a while. I take my seat and class begins. Miss H explains that there is a project we have to do, and it's on famous landmarks and their purpose. This was a partnered project, and lucky me, was paired with Kyle. I thought not only was this going to give me a bad grade, but it also meant that he had to come over to my house, or I had to go over to his house. Obviously, I didn't want someone to come over to my house, nor did I wish to go anywhere for that matter. So I made a stupid decision and decided to give Kyle my phone number. Everything was alright for the first couple of days. Nothing was creepy besides the look he gave me a few days ago. Except for one afternoon where he and I just finished writing. We both did 2 pages each, and we're going to pick out highlights from both of them and combine them together. This was a couple of hours ago. My parents were out at dinner and I was home alone playing some computer games when I heard what sounded like glass shattering from the basement, which was odd because I was on the 2nd floor. Being the coward that I am, I decided to pause my game and listen. Not sure what to expect, I sat listening for a good 5 minutes before resuming my game. Another minute goes by and I can hear the door to the basement open. I don't have any pets besides the cat that I have, which was on my bed at the time. I muted my computer and turned off the monitor, grabbing my phone to dial 911. This was on a landline installed in my room, which was my dad's office for some time. I quickly told the operator the situation and she had dispatched an officer. I hear silent footsteps up the stairs. It felt like forever, which was only roughly 3 minutes. I heard sirens. I had never felt so safe in my life. That was until my floor slammed open. I couldn't see much, but only a mere silhouette of a figure. The sirens passed my window with enough light for me to see the face of Kyle. He doesn't notice me, but he hides in the closet parallel to me. I've never been so scared in my entire life. His facial expression was the same from when I had told him to move out of my seat. It's roughly 30 seconds of utter darkness besides some street lights glaring in through the window. The door slams open and a cop rushes in, turns on the light and asks me if I'm okay. I scream my lungs out trying to explain that he's in the closet while crying. He opens the closet and gets attacked immediately, but luckily he tases Kyle. I asked the cops why they arrived so fast, on only suspicion, and he told me that the operator said she heard another phone click after I hung up. I handed in the project a week later because I took some time off from school and stayed at my grandparents' house. I got an A. So Kyle, let's never meet again. Note: I had recently noticed my Facebook had my phone number and address on it. Needless to say, that's probably how he got my address, and without a doubt, I took both of them off and set my profile to private. Update: I had just gotten off the bus and started heading to my front door. As I try to unlock it, to my surprise, it's unlocked. This is weird because my doors are always locked no matter what. I open the door and I see broken vases, moved furniture, and smashed photos on the wall, and I think to myself, I just got robbed. As the thought of getting robbed flowed through my mind, I heard something that I will never forget until the day I die. "Welcome home, buddy. I missed you." I turn to the left and see Kyle, wielding a piece of broken glass, inching towards me with a creepy grin. I previously took some jujitsu and tackled him to the floor. He stabbed my side and upper arm. I charge back my arm and punch his nose. I bolt out of there. I knock on my neighbor's door, not home. Try the next house. They let me in and call the cops. Kyle is out of the house bleeding, looking for me. He looks into the house adjacent to the one I'm in and breaks in. From there, it's a blur because I passed out, but I awoke to the sounds of multiple police cars and Kyle bleeding on the street. He was taken to a therapist and was deemed as showing psychotic traits. I wasn't cut deep enough to get stitches, but I'm just lucky to be alive. Kyle, I hope I never see you again in my life. Every day I walk home from school with my friend because she lives only a little bit away from me, so our routes line up. At the start of the school year, we noticed there was a man usually looking at us from his window while we walked home from school. I found it a little bit weird, but ultimately didn't think much of it. A few months ago, after the heat of summer died down a bit, he started sitting out on his porch when we were walking by. Usually he would just smile at us. Sometimes I smiled back, but I usually ignored him. One day, as I was walking by his house, he waved to me from where he was sitting. I stopped and waved back at him and told him to have a nice afternoon as I walked past. It felt a little bit weird because he didn't reply, but eventually I forgot about the whole thing. Once, when my mother was at work and I was alone at our house, I noticed him walking past my house several times through my window. I felt very creeped out and uncomfortable. I considered talking to my parents about it just in case, but I ultimately convinced myself he wasn't doing anything wrong, so I guess it didn't really matter. Yesterday, I walked home from school alone because I stayed behind with some other kids outside the school for a few hours since we had art club that day, and I didn't want to walk home just to have to come back fairly soon after. I had just bought myself a nice pair of wired headphones a few weeks ago with money I've been saving up for a long time since I don't have a job. I was playing them over one ear as I was walking home. On the way home, there is a public lot with a stable on it that I like to cut through to get into my yard as quickly as I can, rather than walking around the property. Sometimes people like to hang around it to meet up, but there wasn't anyone on it that I could see. As I rounded a corner on the stables, somebody grabbed the back of my shirt. From the way they were grabbing it, I could see part of their hand. I jerked forward and they grabbed the top part of my headphones. The wire was at the bottom part of my neck and it got stuck for a moment, and I remember feeling like if I couldn't get away, something very bad was going to happen. The wire eventually snapped and I took off running as fast as I could, screaming. They let go of my shirt and I hopped the half-length fence to our property, and I ran as fast as I could out into the sidewalk in front of my house because I was worried that I would take too long on the lock if they were following me. By the time I actually got to the sidewalk point, I was crying and I felt like I was going to collapse because I was so scared. When I looked over my shoulder, I couldn't see anyone, but I kept running until I reached my friend's house in case whoever was there was still around. When I got there, I was in tears, and it took a bit to explain the situation because they couldn't understand me. I tried calling my mother, but she wouldn't pick up the phone. My friend's mom called the police, and they came to check things out. There was nobody at the stables, and they told me that it was most likely some kid trying to mess around, but they escorted me home to where my mother was waiting for me anyways. I didn't tell them about the old man because I was worried they would think I was crazy, considering he hasn't technically done anything, but there's something in my mind that keeps telling me that it was him who grabbed me at the stables. When I was walking home from school today, I brought a screwdriver with me in case I needed to defend myself. I also had my friend with me. My mother offered to pick me up from school, but I was worried that if I had shown how the encounter had affected me, then it would make things worse. I also avoided the stables, and my friend made sure I made it to the door. The guy on the porch wasn't there today, and I'm still not fully sure if it's him or not. I feel terrible that my headphones broke, but I can't help but wonder what would have happened if they didn't. I will update if anything else happens, and I am using a spare account in case any personal details not in this post can be found on my main account. So I recently posted something else on Let's Not Meet about my experience with an ex at college, but I do have another story to share that happened when I was in high school. It's not nearly as exciting, but it was the first time I had ever interacted with a guy who made me afraid for my safety. When I was 15, I enrolled in a program that allowed high schoolers to take classes at the local community college. The credits earned there would apply as both high school and college credits. My first semester as part of this program, I took a basic English and creative writing type class, and I was by far the youngest student. My classmates found out pretty quickly that I was a minor and were curious why and how I was attending college classes while still in high school. I explained the situation to them, and they were all very nice and accommodating towards me, and I ended up exchanging IM screen names with quite a few of them. One of my classmates to who I gave my IM info was a 19-year-old guy named Nick. He was a bit of an odd duck, short and chubby with a sparse beard, and he frequently wore a black cape lined with red on the inside to class. He seemed to be into darker stuff, was a huge fan of vampires and Satanism, and listened to some intense music. I didn't really mind at the time because I was mostly just relieved that I had made some friends despite my young age. He began to instant message me on a regular basis pretty quickly. The classroom we were in had computers for each of us, so Nick would often message me during class on those computers. At first, things seemed to be quite normal. We talked about our interests and hobbies, family and homework assignments, and gossiped about other classmates. Pretty soon, though, Nick started bringing up some awkward topics that, as a naive 15-year-old girl, made me uncomfortable. Nick talked about how pretty he thought I was, and he would often tell me I looked a few years older than I was. To be fair, I was quite tall for a 15-year-old and said I acted mature for my age. He asked if I had a boyfriend, and when I told him he did, he seemed upset and disappointed. He said if I broke up with my boyfriend and dated him, he would treat me like his vampire princess. He told me he wanted to kiss me and touch me everywhere and that he hoped I would let him bite my neck. I politely yet firmly turned him down every time he brought it up, and he didn't seem to get the hint though. Since I was too young for a driver's license, my mom had to pick me up at the college campus and drive me home. Due to her schedule, I usually had to wait for her to pick me up outside the building my class was held in. Most of the time, I would have to wait about a half hour. Nick started following me out of class and would often wait with me until my mom pulled up. He would pressure me for more personal info and trash talk my current boyfriend. He commented that my boyfriend was probably cheating on me, so I should dump him preemptively. When my mom finally pulled up, I would breathe a sigh of relief and jump in the car. Online, Nick began to get more aggressive. Anytime he messaged me, he would start talking about my body in really inappropriate ways. I would repeatedly tell him I didn't like what he was saying, but no matter how hard I tried to steer the conversation away, he would always bring it back to dirty talk. He told me he didn't mind that I was mostly flat-chested, stating that he didn't need more than a handful, and told me I should wear tighter clothing to class so he could better imagine what I looked like naked. He mentioned that he frequently fantasized about doing stuff to me while in class and specifically mentioned bending me over the computer desks. When I was at home, I would refuse to respond to these messages if he took it too far, but when we were in class, I had no excuses as to why I wasn't messaging him back. He would sit next to me in class every day and would send me messages, then stare at me until I replied. If I didn't, he would get upset and his messages would become more hostile. He would say things like, "Why aren't you responding to me? You know I can see you ignoring me. I thought you were too young and pure to turn into one of those bitchy sluts, but I guess I was wrong." The messages would pop up one after the other until I replied, and I would often cave and say, "Sorry, I was just paying attention to the teacher and didn't see your messages." Of course, he'd immediately change his tune, then start right back up with his twisted idea of a romantic conversation. I felt like there was no escaping his barrage of sexual commentary, and I vowed to just stick it out and make it to the end of the semester. I thought if I got through the class, I could easily avoid him on campus in the spring. Everything came to a head towards the end of the fall semester. Nick sat next to me in every class, messaged me constantly, called me weird pet names in front of other people, and would always try to be in physical contact with me. He'd put his arm around my shoulders and always wanted to hug me. It made me excruciatingly uncomfortable, but I was too shy and nervous to ask him to stop. I would shrug his arm off my shoulders and try to stick to high fives. When he hugged me, I kept my hips as far away from him as possible. I even told one of the mentors at my youth group that there was somebody at my college making me feel uncomfortable. At the time, I wasn't sure if I was overreacting, so I asked my youth leader if I could forward him the parts of our online conversations that I thought were the most inappropriate. My youth leader's reaction quickly made me realize this was serious, and he explained that what Nick was doing was both extremely inappropriate and also potentially illegal. He asked if I could keep him updated on the situation and send him any more questionable messages. A couple of days later, Nick messaged me. For some reason on that particular day, he was acting extremely forward. He made several of the usual comments about my looks and body, then started to say how frustrating it was that I was so hot, and he told me I was too beautiful and that it drove him crazy seeing me in person. Then he said something that sent chills down my spine. He told me, "You are so sexy and gorgeous that I'd probably still bang you even if you were dead." He then went on to describe in great detail how he had a fantasy of having sex with a girl who was either unconscious or freshly dead. And I mean in great detail. I was absolutely horrified and just sat there staring at the barrage of messages as they popped up. After a few minutes, I was able to snap myself out of my terrified stupor and immediately blocked him. I forwarded the messages to my youth leader, who became extremely incensed. He urged me to tell my parents or the campus police so they could help keep him away from me. He told me that this could be considered a threat and that he wanted me to be safe. He seemed so afraid for me that it actually scared me even more. I told him I would think about telling someone, then signed off I am. Unfortunately, I was young and stupid and did none of the things he suggested. I finished the semester and avoided Nick like the plague. No small task, let me tell you. I begged my mom to show up early so I could leave class and jump right in the car. The first time I did so, she looked behind me and said, "Oh hey, it's your little friend." I turned to see Nick standing outside the classroom building, wearing his black cape and staring blatantly at me. The look on his face was one of cold, furious hatred. I ducked down and shouted, "Please just drive, Mom." My mother looked at me, concerned, then put the pedal to the floor. I did eventually give my mom a shortened explanation of what happened, leaving out some of the more grotesque details. She made a point to show up before my class ended every day and waited right outside my building so I could run out and hop in the passenger side of her car. Fortunately, after he followed me outside a few more times, he seemed to give up. He didn't try to talk to me in class and didn't follow me outside anymore. I did catch him staring at me a few times in class, but in general, he seemed to take the hint and back off. After that class ended, I never saw or heard from him again, and for that I am truly grateful. So, to Vampire Nick, the necrophiliac from a community college, let's not meet ever again. It's been 15 years and you still give me the creeps. "25 male. I got home late last night, which in my apartment complex means all the good parking spots are taken. So I parked a good distance from my apartment and began walking towards it. There is a thunderstorm and it's not raining yet, so the air has energy and smells great. I decided to take my time and make a loop around my building and come up behind it. As I make the corner and begin walking down towards my apartment, I see a guy coming out of the parking lot between two cars. We nod and I slow my pace and he begins walking ahead of me, but I notice he also slowed down his pace to match mine. So I start going even slower, intending to cut the corner as soon as we approach it and enter my apartment as soon as possible, the front door being right on the corner. He seems reluctant to walk too far ahead of me, so already I'm on alert. He approaches the corner first and I come around. He's at my apartment door, shaking my doorknob. He looks at me as I round the corner and says, "I lost my keys." The realization that he was lying and the implication of the lie slammed every one of my systems into high alert. Everything in me told me to not stop, so I kept walking and gave him a sympathetic smile. He turns and stares at me, and then asks if I have a phone that he can borrow. At this point, I'm feeling stuck and panicking. He is pretending that he lives in my apartment, so I can't get in past him. My car is too far away and in the dark, and any sudden movements will alert him that I'm onto him. So I tell him my phone died, which caused my heart to immediately skip a beat, because now he thinks I can't call the cops. I walked one door over and started knocking on the door. It's past midnight. The guy is standing at my doorstep just staring at me. After an eternity, my neighbor who I'm on, "Hey, how are you?" and "Nice night out," speaking terms with, opens the door. I immediately say, "Hey Kevin," and push past him into his apartment. I immediately turn and close the door and lock it. I explained to my neighbor what was happening and he went to get his gun and I called the cops. But the guy was gone and now I'll never be able to walk around my apartment complex without constantly looking over my shoulder. Let me start off by saying I know how terribly dumb and naive I was for letting myself get into this situation. Heck, sometimes I even laugh at how preposterous this whole thing was, and you can too. It is kind of funny at parts. However, at the same time, I knew if I had just been a little bit dumber, I might not have been so lucky. And no, I do not have a foot fetish myself. It had all started a couple of years ago. I was a sophomore in high school, 15 or 16 at the time, and I was hanging out with an extremely toxic and emotionally manipulative acquaintance, Holly, who, let's just say, wasn't shy about getting money in lucrative ways. Such ways included scamming older men for their money, from fake dating profiles she made of other girls in our grade she didn't like, stealing from her parents, and bumming off money and things from her other friends. She had been doing this for years. She was the same age as Carter and I, and was a minor at the time. Sure, we could have been considered friends, but I was much closer to my friend Carter. Carter had been best friends with Holly since freshman year, and honestly, the only reason I hung out with her was because Carter insisted on inviting her to our hangouts every time. Holly wasn't a good person, and I quietly put up with her antics. One day, she started talking about her friend Sarah. Awesome, but honestly, I really didn't care, especially knowing Carter and her ditched me for her. I wasn't really paying attention to the story until Holly asked me if I wanted to sell my socks for money. What the heck? She smiles and proceeds to tell me how they found a super senior, kid you not, who bought knee-high socks for $90. All Sarah did was have to wear them outside for an entire day. Yeah, the freak liked them sweaty, I guess. The only thing was, the super senior insisted on meeting in person only. Holly laughed, telling me it was a little weird. Okay, red flag number 1. Holly never really thought things were weird unless they were really weird. Then she proceeds to tell me that this super senior, honestly, I never got his name, so I'll just call him Kyle, was trying to get her in his house the entire time, but finally gave up and they left. You're probably thinking, what the heck? Who would be dumb enough to try to wrangle money from this freak? Me. I'm the idiot. All I really heard was $90 for a pair of old worn socks. I was in. Being the amazing friends they were, Holly and Carter just laughed and informed me that I would have to do it on my own since they had better things to do, whatever that meant. They gave me his Instagram handle and wished me luck. Well, we had a problem right off the bat. You see, I had totaled my car just around a month before and had no vehicle of my own. I'm American and from a small town, so it was hard to get around without a car. Well, being the dummy that I was and still am, I decided, hey, let's just take my mom's car. Huge mistake. So I started messaging this Kyle on Instagram, explaining my situation and how I got in contact with him. I can't remember most of the conversation, but I can remember the guy being really insistent on meeting at his apartment complex. Red flag number 2. Although I'm very stupid and naive at times, I at least have common sense. I brushed it off and suggested other local areas, like a Starbucks parking lot, local park, etc. But this guy wasn't backing down. Finally, after much convincing, I get Kyle to agree to meet in a nearby park right by his house. Red flag number 3. So I convinced my mom to allow me to drive her car and I meet up with Kyle at the park. It's mostly deserted, but it's by a busy street so I don't feel too uncomfortable. That's when I met Kyle. He was a huge, fat, sweaty guy with a beard who reeked to shit. And think neckbeard. My guy was at least 19, but looked like he could be pushing mid-20s. That's when I knew I made a mistake, but there was no way I was going to say no to $90. I awkwardly greeted him and formal pleasantries were exchanged. I don't remember much of the weird-ass conversation other than a couple of highlights. Number 1. The dude brought rope. Turns out he was into bounding feet as well, and I was super creeped out. Dude then starts to tie my feet together after I mumble the weak agreement. All I remember is staring at the sun, wishing I could be anywhere but here right now. Number 2. This guy had the gall to call my feet ugly while rubbing and massaging them. That kind of hurt, not going to lie. Number 3. Dude was insistent, almost straight up begging on showing me his knife collection back at home, and he would pay me extra to come with him. Yeah, no, it wasn't going to happen. I knew what that meant, and my virgin ass wanted no part in it. Highlights continued. Number 4. Dude straight up sniffed my socks after I gave them to him. No shame whatsoever. Told me he liked the vinegar smell. Yeah, it turns out the socks used to belong to my now deceased grandfather. I had just grabbed a random knee-high pair from my sock drawer. Number 5. After refusing Kyle multiple times to come back to his house, he gave me 1/3 of the price we agreed on since I refused to come home with him. Whatever, I was disgusted and disturbed anyways and wanted to get the heck out of there. After returning home and getting my ass chewed up by my mom, I told her the truth and she asked me why I took her car. I promptly blocked the guy and called my friends to tell them about the experience. Much to my surprise, Holly informed me about something she forgot to tell me about. Apparently, the guy had made several threats of shooting up his high school's graduation and was very well known to the local police. Although I thought this was over and done with in my junior year of high school, I received threatening and grotesque phone calls which I reported to the police. Carter and Holly were also called and threatened. While mine were more of a sexual nature, theirs involved being called extremely specific slurs. Holly was black and Carter was gay, and he even recited Holly's address. Although I never found out who did them, and there was a good chance Holly could have orchestrated the whole thing herself. I can't help but wonder if Kyle was behind them. So, to the foot fetish ass guy who tried to get a monitor to come back to his apartment and look at his knife collection, let's not ever meet again. Edit. Found our old exchanges on Instagram for verification, and wow, he was way more persistent than what I remember and even creepier. Apparently, he even also gave me his phone number. Glad I just made up an excuse right after the interaction.